Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the steering committee meeting for January 16th, 2025. We are meeting in virtual space today, and our conference room is available for in-person. So before we begin, I'd like to, we acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional and unceded territory of the Lummi, Nooksack, Samish, and Semiahmoo people who have cared for and tended this land since time immemorial. Truth and acknowledgement are critical in building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and difference. We begin this effort to acknowledge what has been buried by honoring the truth. We pay respect to their elders, past and present. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together here today. And please join us in uncovering such truths at any and all public events. Well, welcome everybody and Happy New Year. Glad to see you. We have a very light agenda today. Jill's going to kick us off talking about maybe, I guess I'm gathering it's some new system of doing our meeting summaries, Jill.
Yeah, this is just a quick little update to let everyone know we don't have Jenna doing our meeting summaries anymore, and Clerk of the Council Kathy Hawk would like us to give AI meeting summaries a try. So we're gonna do that for a little while and see how that goes. It's just an FYI.
Okay, that'll be interesting. Um,
Barry,
yes, go ahead, Stephen.
I may have missed a meeting someplace, but what's happened to Jenna, Jill?
She is being redirected to more council-focused communications work, but we still have her as backup and to do our social media.
Yeah, she'll still be working for the social media effort for the task force.
Well, wish her luck for me. We'll miss her.
Yeah, I hear you. Justice Project implementation plan update. I don't have a whole lot to say other than the J-pop today is our third meeting. It's exciting. It's moving along. Our chairs have joined us in our steering committee. Welcome again to Tasha and Hannah. Happy to have you here today. The one thing I was hoping someone from the executive's office could be here to give us a little more clarity on the owner's rep contract situation, because I have some information, but not granular. But the contract is close. Peter and I were both on the interview committee for the contractor for that effort, and we have selected a contractor, and they've been in the contract negotiation process now for a couple of weeks, I think. Kayla did tell me yesterday that today was a crucial, maybe final meeting on the negotiations for cost and scope of work. But that scope of work will be coming to the council 2 weeks from this past Tuesday. So I think that's the 28th of January. We'll be looking at that and get some consensus around the scope of work for that contractor. And then soon after, I'm told anyway, that we will have an inked contract sometime in the month of February, maybe even early February. So crossing fingers, hoping that that's what happens. There's a lot of work to be done, and those folks are going to be doing a lot of that work and a lot of that coordination. So that's all I have on the Justice Project. So we can move to any questions, first of all. I know that's there's not a lot of hard dates on that or a firm timeline, but I did want to give the steering committee at least what I knew. Dan?
Yeah, can you so you're talking about the contract for the actual capital development, is that
No, it's called the owner's rep. So they're the ones that are like they'd be like the project managers of the construction side. They'd be looking at they would be looking at recruitment of the contractors, architectural and construction. So that's one of the missions they have in their scope of work.
And can I speak to that a little bit, Barry?
Yeah.
It was I'm sorry you were all not there to see the quality of the three teams that we interviewed. I was impressed with particularly with the group that we chose, with their experience and their reach in all the different areas. It's not just, working with like a contractor or something like that. It's experience with a specific experience around criminal justice, building jails, building behavioral care centers, being able to design operations, best practices, really, and modern practices around how to operate a jail and behavioral care center. And yeah, it was very impressive. I very much look forward to moving forward with this team.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. They'll also be helping us with community engagement as we move along through the process. So they'll be, I'm sure, working with this group, at least via the planning team, on, a lot of the things that we might want to, and vehicles we want to use to communicate out to the public. Stephen?
Yeah, Peter or Barry, can you give us some sense of what that specific experience with criminal justice construction actually looks like, where that would make a difference in this kind of oversight?
I think they were involved. We had 3 different pitches, but I think they were involved in Franklin County, weren't they, Peter?
Oh yeah, yeah. Franklin County being Ohio, where many
Ohio.
of us went and visited recently. But there, each team had a great deal of experience with, I mean, in some cases, hundreds of jail facilities and medical facilities and such. And then some of the more interesting to me teams were around behavioral health planning, spaces, trauma-informed design, operations, and then also analysis of a community's need for jail size and makeup. What types of facility, and that's something we're going to be facing really quickly here is that whole size and makeup questions. So they've got lots of experience in all those areas.
I think what I'll do is I'll round up the kind of their resume that they sent us, and maybe have Jill send that out to the steering committee so you can kind of see firsthand, what their experiences are. So I'll get that to you, Jill, today.
Okay.
Dan?
Yeah, this might be a question for the JPOP committee later this afternoon, but the county council is considering a community benefits assessment and a PLA, a project labor agreement that would require any contract over $5 million to have a labor component to it. I think that's up for discussion on the 28th, if I have that correct. And I'm trying to understand, I have like just the most minimal information on this, but I'm trying to understand what the impacts could be for the development of capital, for the capital development for the jail, but also for the behavioral care center. And then if the behavioral health campus at 2028 division is, if that's going to be as envisioned out there, what that would look like for the repurposing of the work center. So there's a number of different capital projects that I have questions about when it comes to that ordinance that is being considered from or with county council.
Yeah, totally
The
separate.
president,
Totally separate, but related, obviously. So I don't want to go into too much detail on that today, but I will tell you that I've been working with the executive's office and talking about our concerns, especially around how the owner's rep, for instance, would be able to work in those conditions if there was a community benefit agreement. So there's a whole stakeholder missing out of this conversation so far. And I'm going to be bringing that up on the 28th to make sure that we are having that conversation with the people that are going to be involved in these capital projects.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Good point. Really, it's been bothering me for weeks. Anything else? Any other questions? All right. Items for the next task force agenda. We're gonna be announcing our 2025 committee sign up. Is that the deal, Jill?
Confirming it as well, asking the members to confirm their choices or to switch their selections, assign new proxies if necessary. So Peter and Holly and Marty, I might reach out to you to just give a little intro about this item and ask or encourage the members to indicate any changes to the list that will be in the packet.
Okay, thanks, Jill.
One of the things I'm hoping to at least mention is that the importance of signing up and attending. If you sign up for committee and then only attend from time to time, it impacts quorum, which is something we've been challenged with lately in several of our committees. So that is a point that I think should be made during the meeting as well.
Okay. We'll have another update, of course, on the implementation plan. I'm hoping, and I'm thinking that our next quarter report for Q4 of 2024 will be out and we could have that presented at the task force meeting. So Jill, I'm sure you'll be coordinating with Kayla on that to find out when they're going to be issuing that report.
Yeah.
The other thing is Peter and I and Heather have been talking about how to bring policy forward to the task force. And so I'm going to just do a short little presentation on how to do the mechanics around motions and stuff on parliamentary procedure, but also on some of the things that you can do to vet your ideas to when you do bring it to when it gets to the council. So it's had some thought and some stakeholder input into it. So I've been working on that right now, and like I said, it'll be short, but it'll give you some information on how to bring policy into this group. This is kind of where it starts, and then develop it through into the task force and then on to the council or the executive's office, depending on the direction. So we'll be talking about that. So anything else anyone can think of or want to see on the next task force meeting? And that's coming up week after next, right, Peter?
That's right. And Barry, I know you're talking about doing a short presentation. I don't really care how long it is, but I do care how impactful it is. I just want to reiterate, I think that since it is the task force's main job to bring forward recommendations for the county council, for the county executive and such, that and we have not been doing any of that in the last year. I would really love to see get us all comfortable with doing so. And I think you're going to be a great person to help everybody on the task force become comfortable with that process, to think about how the committees generate recommendations and bring them forward to the main body, and then for the main body to deliberate, perhaps do more research and such, and then finalize a recommendation so that for an actionable recommendation. And just really interested in having a full conversation around what that looks like for everybody. So
yeah,
that's the intention.
Jill? Sure, gotcha.
There was a mention about Rachel Lucy coming to the IPRTF meeting to do that presentation. Is that still happening, or should I make Barry our main
No.
presenter?
No, Barry is our Rachel Lucy.
Okay.
She
I'm
was
with
not,
Rachel.
I don't think she was available. And in thinking about it further, it just seemed like Barry is really the right guy to do it.
Okay.
So
I think
yeah.
what I'll try to leave you with is like just a basic flow chart. So you have something hard in writing that shows the process, as well as, good explanation, obviously during the presentation, but at least you'll have something to take with you and remind you of how the process works. So,
Yeah,
Holly?
that'd be great. May I ask one more question?
Sure.
Of you, Barry, and I guess I'm pointing at Stephen as well, because you've been through this for so long. Is there the role of committees in bringing forward good work and recommendations to the task force? If you have any thoughts, ideas on how we can queue up this work, and so that we can get the most from our time on our committees and bring recommendations forward. I'd just be so curious, you and Dan and anybody else, how best to make that work, since we're going to be focusing on that topic in the next meeting. I just would love to have some good thinking on that in advance. So any thoughts you have?
I had planned on talking about the importance of many of these ideas do originate in those committees. So that is kind of the think tank where everything comes from, that goes through steering, and it does have a process. It's never been kind of documented, and that's something that I will attempt to do. So, Tasha.
Along those same lines, a recommendation from J-Pop, does that go to Peter first, since we're kind of a subcommittee of IPRTF? And just, is there I guess I think of in terms of chain of command, the chain of command goes there and then on the way up?
Well, we'll have a conversation about that, but I think it would fall under the normal committee flow. So anything that originates from the J-Pop would come to this committee, the steering committee.
Okay.
These are the co-chairs of those committees, so it gets vetted and then goes out to the full task force.
Okay.
Holly?
Yeah, Barry, I just love the idea of a flow chart. I think that's going to be really helpful for people. And one thing I want to add is I think it would also be helpful to talk about what kinds of things would be appropriate for policy, like the way Peter would describe it, like there's a problem and you can talk about what the potential solutions are. But then what are the things that would be appropriate for taking all the way through to the council, right? So I think that would be really helpful too.
Yeah. All right. Any other comments or questions on that topic? Stephen?
Yeah, I'm prompted by Holly's comment to say we've heard often from Kayla and Melora and Erica that they really want policy recommendations coming out of the committees. And I will be transparent that I don't understand what they're looking for when they say policy recommendations. What level of specificity, what parameters, and so it may require some consultation with the end users of these recommendations, but some clarity on what really they are looking for out of the task force and out of the committees feeding into the task force would be helpful.
Peter?
I'm just so glad you said that, Stephen, because that is kind of the missing element. And maybe we should make sure that Kayla is prepared, or Erica is prepared to speak to how recommendations and policy recommendations in particular could be in what form would be most helpful. I think we know the areas that they're interested in. They've made it very clear to us, but we have not our committees just have not really done that work yet. And so we do have a great opportunity here. And so let's make sure to reach out to Kayla, Erica, and anybody else who might be able to speak to that in the next meeting.
So I'll do two things. I'll collaborate with them on the presentation itself, and then also invite them to make sure that they are there so they could answer those real specific questions. Tasha.
Just along those same lines, if you have any former policies that came up through committee and then just made its way through, that we can just review some past ones, whether they were passed in council or they were declined, but just like a rough draft of something that we can follow.
Okay.
And
Joe.
Barry, just to prime that pump a little bit, we have the adoption of the racial equity toolkit. And a couple of things like that, and I'm sure Jill could help dig into the archives for things like that as examples that Tasha was asking for.
Go ahead, Jill.
You're going to be speaking with Kayla. Barry, did you want to ask her about the Q4 report, or would you like me to email her about that?
Why don't you email her so that's on the record, on your record? Yeah.
Will do. Thank you.
Anything else on policy and bringing it up the pipeline? All right, so we are at other business. Anybody have anything they want to talk about? Dan.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to Tasha's question. There's been some precedent when it comes to I don't know if it would be policy. It's more programmatic. So the GRACE program, the LEAD program, the alternate response team, and Deacon Center, and the electronic home monitoring program for the city all came through discussions either at the task force level or the behavioral health committee level. They were I wouldn't say informal, but they weren't guided by any kind of like set of policy principles. And so I think that just moving forward, it would be helpful given the fact that we have a lot of work to do when it comes to behavioral health improvements. We have the introduction of the mobile medical units that'll be taking place here fairly soon at Division Street, and other improvements to that subject parcel. So it would be helpful from the task force to have some guidance as to how we make recommendations. I don't want to I'm a city council person. I don't have any authority when it comes to the county other than my role as behavioral health co-chair. So I just want to make sure that we're doing everything the way that would lead to positive outcomes when it comes to policy recommendations. And I do need some further clarity on what that looks like. Speaking to Stephen's point earlier, that it just would be helpful. And I know that there was a document that was circulated. I just need further clarity. That's really it.
Okay, Marty.
Well, Peter, if you were going to speak to that point and the policy stuff, go ahead.
Okay, let me do that then. Dan, thank you so much for bringing that up. I think that's exactly what we're trying to get to. I'm interested to hear, since you are also have so much institutional knowledge on this subject, it sounds like the ART, the GRACE, LEAD, etc., did not come through recommendations, programmatic or policy or otherwise, through IPRTF, but somehow came out of this body more informally. I'd be very interested to hear more about that, and then also getting you the clarity you need so that we can so you feel comfortable, particularly in your important role with Behavioral Health Committee, on those goals that we have all agreed on, what we're going to be focusing on, and moving things forward so that you can make the recommendations that will then come to this group and we can move them forward. We got a lot of work to do, and it just seems like giving you that clarity is what this next meeting is all about.
Stephen,
Thanks.
Yeah, following up on Dan's and Peter's comments, up to this point, the task force has had a lot of flexibility, and that's been a real strength, a real something we could take advantage of, approaching different things in different ways. I think at this point we're at a time when that's a bit of an impediment, because if, for instance, the programs that Dan identified weren't really adopted by the task force. They were generated out of task force discussions, but they were programs, first of all, not policies, and they were implemented by existing, government offices, mostly the health department. So that's part of what I was trying to get at, is there aren't that many things that we have formally run through a policy recommendation process. We can come up with some examples per Tasha's request. But that's the kind of clarity I'm looking for. And I don't really have a specific question for Kayla when she shows up. I just want her to be specific about what she is asking for from us. Because we've done different things different ways, and now we're being asked to do something in a particular way. But we're not guided to what that particular way is.
no, I'm glad you brought that up, Stephen, because a lot of those policies were developed out of members of the task force that worked for the health department or in the prosecutor's office. And the ideas were talked about quite a bit in the task force, but they didn't, like you said, they didn't go through any kind of a formal, the task force is now putting this through and we voted on it and right? So, that's good and bad, I guess. I guess it was good that we accomplished the work for sure, but we should have that process so people can use it. So, Dan?
Yeah, I don't want to overspeak here, but I wanted to address Peter's question about, you know, like how these things happened. So GRACE program, so I think it's important to think about like a cross sector implementation and generation. That's how these things all occurred. LEAD program largely came out of the prosecutor's office, but the idea of this was discussed within the task force, behavioral health and other committees, I think law and justice as well. GRACE program was multi-jurisdictional, hospital, city, county, opportunity council, and others all met to try to create this program. I went to, I don't know how many different cities to examine their programs for 911 response to make improvements there. And then the alternate response team was guided out of what I would consider a systems whole for crisis response. And that those discussions came from the Behavioral Health Committee, but they landed at the City Council. And that's when my Public Safety Committee, that I chaired, directed the mayor to create a budget item to make this program happen. And so I think I just really can't emphasize enough that we can generate things out of committee. We can bring them up to the steering and then task force and then county council, but they really do depend on different jurisdictions working together. And I'd like to just make it clear and point out that the response systems division of the county health department operates every program that I just mentioned. And those programs serve different people and different jurisdictions, but they largely serve Bellingham. And so we are in this collaboration together when it comes to city, county, and I'd like to point out that the city of Bellingham exists within the county of Whatcom. So we work together on these issues, and we've done it pretty well. And I just want to make sure that when we're talking about clarity and direction, of like what the task force and what the committees can do and what they're expected to do, that we think about that, that we're all working across sectors, across departments, and just to be abundantly clear when it comes to that. So I'm trying to speak to Peter's point, and Barry, to you had brought it up as well. So I'm just trying to provide some background and some knowledge on that one. So thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Dan, because that's part of, when I mentioned vetting your idea, that's kind of part of that, understanding who's impacted by your idea, who's going to have to be the ones working on it, creating budget for it, the list goes on. But that's important to understand that when the idea comes forward, understanding the impacts and any unintended consequences you might think of, and the list goes on. But vetting your idea what is crucial, I think. Peter?
I just wanted to offer to you, Barry, if you want some, I would really like for Kayla, Erica, or whomever else to be really well prepared for this. And if you need my thought partnership, if you will, I'm happy to be in a meeting or whatever to get this agenda item set up. So I know you can do it yourself, but feel free to reach out if you would need anything.
I probably will be in touch.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Anything else on other business? Jill?
Yeah, I just wanted to let everyone know that at last night's council meeting, the council vacated the position on the IPRTF that was held by Jason McGill. And so I will be putting that vacancy up on the county website, hopefully later today. We do have one application for it already in anticipation of that vacancy occurring. It's from Eve, and I think I'm gonna mispronounce her name, Smason Marcus. She's also with Northwest Youth Services. So there you go. That's it.
Okay, thanks, Jill. Raylene?
Hi, sorry I came in a little bit late, too many meetings, same day. I just wanted a couple highlights. One is I'm going to be reaching out to Wendy Jones to see if she's interested in joining us on the Legal and Justice Subcommittee this afternoon. And Jake Weebush is actually going to reach out to Bruce Van Gluck to see if he's interested in assisting us. A couple of the retired people that aren't too far removed that probably still have a lot of good thoughts and might be able to assist us in some of our matters. So we're going to be focusing on that. I met with Nikki D'Onofrio with DV SAS Commission and Kayla and Sat Paul last week, Friday. We're just working on the logistics, but the intent is by mid-February to have an advocate from the DV SAS Commission to be in the county courthouse by the Superior Court Clerk's office to be able to assist. There'll be an advocate that speaks Spanish to be able to assist individuals with sexual assault and intimate partner protection orders in that area. So I just wanted to throw that out there because it's kind of a highlight and I'm excited about it happening. Anyways, thanks.
Great idea. Great idea, Raylene. Thank you. Marty?
Wow, Raylene, that would be so great to get the word out once that's in place. Like such a accomplishment and great thing to publicize. Anyway, I was kind of looping back to the items for the next task force agenda, which also is other business here. Do we want to talk at all about the committee action planning process in this meeting and or at the IPRTF meeting?
That's something we should probably bring back to this group.
Okay. Well, I think Holly and I are available to meet with any committee chairs, co-chairs to help develop your action plans for your committees and just put them into give them some structure. You know, you all have a lot going on in your committees, and it's probably a matter of just, you know, writing that out in a way that will convey the, you know, what are your main strategies and how are you going about what actions are you taking or planning, and then trying to calendar out a few things for like when speakers would be invited, that kind of thing. So Holly and I are available to assist with that. I don't know if Peter or Heather want to add anything, but
Sure.
please reach out.
Yeah, and Peter and Heather are available as well. We've been making that clear over the last few months and really want to work with the committees to get that planning done. I recently updated a document that this group has seen with a flow chart of our committees, what it is that what goals we all agreed on, 10 goals, and 3 of those we all agreed were the ones that we should particularly focus on. There are I'm happy to meet with anyone who is interested in going through a process in their committee to decide on what strategies that they would like to use to meet those goals. And I've been thinking a lot about the role of work groups within a committee, where people take the time, and I know it's tough, but take the time to sit down and think through these things as an individual, come together with the other individuals who have done the same work, and then bring something forward to the group, doing research, thinking, and putting one's thoughts together. And I know we do a lot of meeting, but I'm not entirely sure that some of this work can actually be done in a meeting, and might need to take a work group sort of situation. And we do have affordances for work groups. So that's just a pitch. Happy to talk with anybody about my thoughts on that matter.
So I saw Jill's hand go up, so I was gonna let her go ahead of Tasha in case she's got something on this issue.
I do not. I have a different item.
Okay, then I'll go to Tasha.
And what I was what popped into my brain had nothing to do with what Peter just commented on. So if anyone has anything to say specifically to Peter, I'll defer to them first. So that
I'll ask if that's what Heather wants to talk about.
Yeah, hi everybody. I just want to add my perspective too is that those top 3 priorities, my memory is one is building the jail and how the IPRTF can support the jail and behavioral care center. The second one is expansion and evaluation of diversion programs, right? And the third one was data. Am I remembering all them right? Okay, thank you.
You are. Those are the 3.
And I think that Peter and I pictured that wouldn't exclude any of the other 7, or to Dan's point, there's also some magic of the task force historically that you can't necessarily capture in a standard operating procedure, that those discussion items of brainstorming, and all of us have different rooms that we get to be in and walk away and make other decisions and create new programs. And so they're not meant to be exclusive. They're just meant to be, like, my dream would be on the IPRTF agenda every time that there's those 3 topics as a whole IPRTF, and we get to say, what's happening with this and how are we contributing? And is there anything we can be helping administration with right now? Are there key questions that we should be weighing in on? And like a, super helpful way that then in our next annual report, we will have some records of at least these 3 key areas we've made steady progress on in specific ways. And so I would also picture that each of the subcommittees in those planning conversations would have the question of, okay, how does the behavioral health intersect with these 3 priority areas, and what agenda items make sense for us to discuss to help progress in that intersection of behavioral health and data, or behavioral health and the jail, or behavioral health and diversion. And same with the legal and justice, and same with index, and same with J-pop potentially. So that I just want to add that clarity and see if people agree with me.
Okay, thanks, Heather.
Okay.
Tasha?
Well, now that made me think of something else. So I'm going to kind of direct some of my conversation earlier when I talked about bringing forth ideas, J-pop, and you said the steering. So yesterday, I'm just going to go with it here. Yesterday, I had a conversation with Eric Ritchie. We were in a OIS investigation meeting, so we had a sidebar because last steering committee, Heather had brought up the behavioral health center attached to the jail, and that there's a belief that it will be like an involuntary, you can't leave type of center. There's also understanding that it's a voluntary center, that you have the ability to leave. It seems like there's some divergence of ideas of what that's actually going to look like. The conversation I had with Richie, and I think that's something that some of the things that he brought up and that we need to discuss maybe in a small group or this committee, but when he was under the impression that the behavioral health center would be like, you go in there because you were arrested for whatever you're arrested for, either addiction related or because your behavioral health actions were a crime, you were arrested. And so, but you could go into this center and basically you're there. And I said, okay, well, under the Fourth Amendment, that's, you know, you're taking away, if they're not allowed to leave and they haven't gone through due process of law, it's not really a voluntary consent to be there because they're basically told you're being arrested if you're not there. If you leave, you'll be arrested. So it's not, in that way, it's a coerced volunteer consent. And if we don't want that and we want them to stay there, then they need to go through the due process of law. Richie and I went back and forth, and basically at the end of the conversation, he goes, well, the civil division, if we want to write up these different things, that we would have the civil division in the office look at the legality of all of it. Because I'm like, you've got federal Fourth Amendment constitutional rights that you have to do. And if there's something, because he referred to the Nashville model, and I don't know the Nashville model other than I've heard that you guys went. So I don't know if they have different state laws that impact the ability to hold someone there in a way that our state doesn't. And we need to be drafting legislative updates to our law that we can then make this work. Because my understanding is we don't have anything like this in Washington state. And so, but recognizing we're not going to get anything between the legislation this session. It's too late, I think, because the session already began, but it's something to anticipate for next legislative session, since we still have 3 years until the jail will be completed and we have time to work this out. And so I would rather be ahead of the game, because often in my perception and my lived experience as a law enforcement officers, people have great ideas. They expect us to carry it out, but they don't really have true authority for what we can and cannot do before they ask us to do it sometimes. And we're often caught between a rock and a hard place. And so that was just a great conversation, just a sidebar Richie and I happened to get into for about 5 minutes. And I was like, yeah, we need to start discussing that aspect of it. And hopefully this is the correct place to do that.
Thanks, Tasha. Heather?
I was actually going to look at you, Council Member Buchanan, and Executive Sadhu for where will that debate happen about whether the behavioral care center is voluntary or involuntary? Is that going to happen at FAB? Is that an internal county discussion? Is that a community forum? Is it IPRTF? Is it J-pop? Is it all of the above in some fashion? And how can we support keeping that organized? Because I do think it's worth a really healthy debate about, and some research, obviously, of is voluntary possible, and what do we need to do to build involuntary if that's actually the right
And that's where we start. I think we start with the law and find out, what are our sideboards and where we can go without changes to state law. So that's number one, to find out the big picture. And I think Number two is we've discussed this concept quite a bit. It's kind of coming in and out of conversations with the council. They understand what the behavioral care center was. We did several presentations on the Nashville visit. And it certainly doesn't hurt to remind them of that. But and I'd offer Executive Sadhu,
Yeah.
what you think about
I wanted to say the same thing, Heather. What you said is all of above. This is not a matter where council or executive or even prosecutor can say, okay, this is how we're going to do, right? And of course, there is need for change in the legislative action from the Washington legislature on this very topic. And it's a very hot topic, but most of the counties, actually, I was at a NACO conference before Christmas, and it was a nationally problem that everybody is seeking, that we are spending millions and millions of dollars when we look at nationwide, and we have no control on that because the effort, it's not the pill that we're going to give or the injection or prescription we're going to give, it's the prep to that. It goes all waste because we prep everything and person says, yeah, you give me the pill, I'll throw it in the toilet right in front of you and walk away, right? People arrest, they bring you to the emergency room, they put them in there, register, and as the police car leaves, they leave too. I mean, this is the reality of all of us. Yes, Fourth Amendment, all these things, we must respect that, but we must carve out a way that we can actually help. And for which we spend a lot of money gearing up to help. And then in the end, it does not work. So yes, I have this. And then one thing I learned is that in the design part of the behavioral health center, if we want to carve out, say, 10 or 20 beds, which are involuntary restraining, then it has to be designed to a certain standards and certain things. And we don't have to do all the beds that way. Very expensive. So yes, I would invite a robust discussion on this in the community as well as with our legislative team. Thank you.
And then the other thing is we have to add those kind of certifications and licensing that would go along with what Paul just said. Yeah. Raylene.
Yeah, just a side note, I know Stephen and I have been in several meetings where this discussion came up with the Ann Deaconess Center for Hope on what the intent was supposed to be, what everybody thought it was going to be. And then because of certain licensings and the ability of staff that had those things, we weren't able to do the involuntary as envisioned for drop off for law enforcement and medical personnel because they can't put hands on and they can't do all of these things and it's not 24/7 and they don't have the correct medical licenses. So if we're going to move towards another structure, we better make sure that that stuff is in place before, if that's the intent, because I think there was a lot of people that weren't happy with the fact that we weren't able to do what we were hoping to do with the first structure.
I'm going to call on Birdie. I saw her waving her physical hand, so you're muted.
Okay, I totally agree with this discussion, and I think I hope the co-chairs don't shoot me for this, but I'm wondering if this is something that would be appropriate for a small work group of the Legal and Justice and Behavioral Health Committee to obviously not figure it all out, but to sort of define the steps and what are the questions that have to get answered and how will those questions be approached, because it sounds like it's a really important discussion and it's fairly early on in the process, given that we have to design the behavioral health center differently, depending what the answer is.
Yeah, exactly. Peter?
I'll do the opposite of shooting you. I'm shooting you with thank yous. This group might remember that I brought forward a recommendation to start a work group on this very topic a couple months ago. There were some conversations I felt like I needed before we really spun it up. I think this is that conversation. And so I would be happy to bring that recommendation forward for consideration. But I think now is the time. Now is the time. And this does seem to be the group to do it. And with all the right players. IPRTF is what I'm talking about, obviously, the main body. So, and legal and justice, that work group could well nest within legal and justice. And I just want to make sure to get all the right people. I know that Eric is on that committee, so that would be appropriate. Thanks.
Stephen.
Yeah, just two comments. Number one is Heather raised the possibility of the FAB having a say in this, and I can't for the life of me recall any little bit of the FAB's charge that would have to do with this kind of policy decision. I don't think the way that board is constituted, that would be an appropriate voice in the discussion. I think there's a policy question right at the outset. Do we want to consider an involuntary kind of portion or totality of the committee? Yes or no? Because you head down two very different paths. And so I would encourage the discussion to start at that point. I think over the last year or so, we've articulated a lot of reasons why we're interested in an involuntary capability within the BCC, and that may or may not, and we'll see what Eric's office comes up with, that may or may not require some legislative change. But the other thing I would say to Tasha's point is I don't think there are any problems with giving someone who's been arrested and is at the front door of the jail/BCC a choice between a treatment detainment and a carceral detainment. I think that is a voluntary placement. We can see what Eric thinks about that, and I hope we can have some discussion about that. A lot of times the prosecutor's office isn't very open to discussion, in my experience. But I hope we can have a little more open discussion on all of these questions. So I agree with Peter's approach to get talking.
Can I respond to Stephen? So in reference to the choice option, I agree. What my point was when I was having the discussion with Richie is, if I give you the choice whether you want to go seek a treatment or be booked on the charge, if you choose treatment, and like the hospital, as soon as I drive away, you leave treatment, what is my authority as an officer? Because I gave you the option of treatment and now you've walked away from treatment. What are our expectations of that person to stay there, to meet, so that we're solving the problem, we're not just continuing to have the problem. And therefore, are we going to say, and this is one of the discussions, if I ITA someone to the hospital and they actually hold them, after 72 hours, they're required to have a due process court hearing to determine if they need to be held again. So if they're in this voluntary center to do that, but they're now saying they want to leave, okay, what's the next process? Because they're not healed. They're not over their addiction. They're not over their, there's still a huge process. So that's where I said, and then Richie was like, well, it's like a pre-trial. They have to do these as part of their pre-trial release. I'm like, yeah, but a pre-trial release still has an initial court hearing before a judge. So if I'm giving them that option, they're not getting that. But if they're leaving, and that's against what we're trying to accomplish here, then what's the process, And if we're telling them they have to stay, then it's a voluntary choice to stay, but it's not really voluntary, because if they leave, there's consequences as well. So it's kind of like if you're a manager and you're like, I'm going to fire you, or you have the choice to leave. That's not really a choice to freely leave your job. That's just, I worry about being too, you're presenting it as a choice, but it's not really a choice. And it's a way to manipulate you into doing something maybe you don't want to do. And that's where I think we have to just have healthy discussions about where the law meets that at.
Just to
Tasha,
add to Tasha's comments, I think what we're confronting here is the difference between a formal kind of assignment of location versus our idea, which we've had for years, to divert before charges are even filed in a way. For instance, what I'm envisioning might have a court hearing and a diversion order before the BCC to formalize the choice that the charged person faces, much as we do with recovery court. You have a threshold hearing, the judge assigns you into recovery court with the approval of the prosecutor's office, but then you have compliance requirements, and you can flunk out of recovery court, and usually there are steps of responses, but one of them might be you're back to being prosecuted for the crime you were originally charged at. Now, if we haven't charged them and it's street reference to the BCC, then we don't have that kind of process. So I think thinking about what that really means to divert somebody before they're charged, which has some very positive aspects to it, but it also has some complicating procedural steps. So it's an important question that you raise.
Before I chime in, I want to check with Jill to make sure that we're not going over time, and
We aren't going over time. We're good. I was just simply going to suggest that that this agenda item or this discussion be scheduled as an agenda item for the February IPRTF and focus it as a learning session for everyone on what can be done, what the laws are, and things like that as a starting point, maybe whether or not a work group needs to be formed, and move this conversation into the full IPRTF, which I'm sure all the members are interested in.
And what I was going to say is Stephen was correct when he said the Nashville model was if you didn't comply with the treatment program, you went back to your original charges. So it was post-charging. It was the way it worked in Nashville. Raylene.
So just brief comments. I mean, we're already technically doing this. I've seen stipulated orders of continuance. I've seen deferred sentences. I've seen deferred prosecutions. I've seen sentences and convictions where the judge says, okay, we're going to give you credit for time served as long as you do your treatment. Well, they're like, yeah, I want to do treatment. I want to go to treatment. I don't want to go to jail. So they get on the bus, they go to the treatment center. The treatment bus stops somewhere on the way, they get off and they don't go to treatment. Well, then it's a probation violation, and then the probation violation is told to the judge, and this person is back out there, and there's basically a warrant for this person's arrest. And usually by the time they get picked up, there's 3 or 4 more charges. So it's, when I brought it up a long time ago, I know they said there was some constitutionality issues. There were some legislative changes that needed to happen. So I really do think this is something that needs to go to the whole IPRTF. That includes some of the attorneys that know more on the constitutionality issues that this state is facing, on saying, well, it's voluntary, but it's not really voluntary, especially when it's connected to a facility where you either do X, Y, or Z, and you're really not going to get out until you either complete the treatment or not.
Well, this has been a very good conversation. I think we're all thinking about the right questions. And I think what Jill's saying is important, that when we do bring it to the task force, that we have some structure around the conversation. So maybe I could work with the co-chairs on how we could develop a kind of a preamble to the discussion item, so we are kind of focused. So in February, so I will work with Heather and Peter on that if they would like to. Stephen.
Yeah, I just want to say, in terms of having the task force be the locus for this discussion, neither I nor Tasha nor Hannah are members of the task force and would not be participants in that discussion. And I think those could be valuable voices. So if there's an alternative way to structure that, I would ask the powers that be to consider that.
Yeah, maybe if we could just say we want to make sure that the co-chairs of all the committees are there, or something to that nature would fit your bill, right, Stephen? Yeah. All right, anything else on other items? Seeing no more, we will go to public comment. Is there anyone that would like to speak to the steering committee from the public?
We do have one attendee. If you would like to speak to the steering committee, please virtually raise your hand now. Okay, go ahead, Renee Reese. You can speak.
Yeah, my name's Renee, and I am actually the clinical nurse manager for Whatcom Triage at the Ann Deacon Center. So listening to this conversation is really beneficial, and I tend to pop in here quite a bit. I do want to make it clear that we are licensed to do involuntary holds. However, we were originally I came back a year ago into this position, and in seeking out why we weren't doing them when we had the license to do so, it was understood that the attorneys for the city are the ones that shut the idea down due to concerns of lawsuits after that. So it's my understanding that that's the area that we would need to focus on if we wanted triage to be somewhere where we could involuntarily hold. We do have everything, the training, the licensing, and we also have the room to do so. So I just wanted to make sure that you guys were aware of that piece of information. So.
Well, thanks for checking in with us, Renee. That's valuable information.
You bet.
Yeah. All right. With that, everybody go and have a great rest of your day. Tasha, something quick?
Just for Renee, real quick, you said room to do so. Like, how many beds would that qualify under?
You're on mute, Renee.
Okay. We have 16 beds here, but we do also have a seclusion room that is all in its own section of our unit for those holds if we needed to use that. It was built into this building for that intention.
All right. All right, everybody. We'll see you at the task force meeting in a week from Monday. We're adjourned.